This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, that one's new. You get two alerts for recording. Great. So good morning. We are here again with Naika in our second workshop with her. Today we're going to talk about sustainable manufacturing, production, and evaluating your supply chain. I hope that everybody has a chance to look at the recording from last session, which is in the general Slack channel. And with that, I'm going to give it to Naika to get started.
Good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to review the value chain analysis. I know we didn't get to do that the last time, so I just wanted to go into that. I use this value chain analysis. Let's go on to the last deck. I use a value chain analysis often, not just in, when I'm teaching students or instructing, but I use it at work. So I often use this, and let's go into present mode. Often use this, and it's a great way for you to analyze the stakeholders within your operations and just to understand different activities. So this is Michael Porter's value chain analysis, and he designed this framework. And so the primary activities are through your supply chain. So when you're thinking of your inbound logistics if as a fashion designer, your inbound logistics would be inbound movement such as receiving, warehousing your pieces, receiving materials, managing different materials, whether you're separating it as a dead stock or saying these are natural fibers, however you're managing that, different parts, inventory, or equipment that you need. So like your sewing machines, your sergers, your thread, all of that stuff would be your inbound logistics. Then your production and operations, those processes convert raw materials. So you're converting natural fibers or your materials like your fabrics into finished goods. So that's also accounts for labor. And that's where if you're a larger organization, you'll have like your project managers step in just to calculate your labor if you have a contract with a supplier a contract with a client. For example, at Ovation In Store, we have our project managers. They're managing the process, this entire production process from inbound to outbound logistics. They're managing that process with the client. So if there's a client like L'Oreal or one of our larger clients, we have project managers managing that process. And then this is also the energy that goes into finished goods and calculating that in terms of the amount you're paying the employees and how much you're charging your clients on top of raw materials and all of that for finished goods. And then your outbound logistics would be processes that pertain to storage of your materials. So if you're doing something like a drop ship, or if you're a retailer like a Nordstrom or a Macy's, can you all hear me? Hold on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. No, I know the browser version, sometimes it goes in and out. So I just wanted to make sure. And then, so there is your marketing and your sales, which is, I think all of us we do this a lot, but we're not very conscious, especially as small designers, small businesses. We're not really conscious of this here. We just know that it's a process, but we're not planning it out. We're not writing things down. Many of us are not using like your Monday.com or your Airtables to manage different projects, which you should, or your Smart Table or Smart Sheet. Marketing and sales, of course, is processes relating to advertising, promoting your pieces, pricing of products, thinking of ways to like your TikToks and all of that we did with the websites. And I do have some more on that I want to go into. And then your customer service. I think when we think of customer service, we think of like a number you call and you're speaking to a customer service rep, but this plays hand in hand with marketing and sales. And customer service, what that can look like is someone responding to comments on your Instagram or your LinkedIn and interacting with consumers or your clients. And customer service is their processes that are offered after the product has been sold and delivered, such as phone service and support, maintenance, repairs, and refunds or exchanges, or there's brands that go even further with thank you notes, and then they automatically sign you up for a newsletter. How did you enjoy your pieces? Those are all things that small businesses are doing to gain leverage in the industry. And these here are considered your primary activities. And these are also considered the most important activities, quote unquote. But with that, a lot of designers or organizations, they rarely look into your support activities. And your support activities would be your firm infrastructure, which would be your different components of your organization, like your accounting, your engineers, your finance, your legal, public relations, quality control. And public relations is not here because that's public relations. It's not the exact thing as marketing and sales, right? So that's public relations would be like your communications management. If a crisis happens within an organization, or like what recently happened with Balenciaga, that would be your PR, and that wouldn't be marketing. Human resources management would be all of that activities that relate to building your workforce, training your workforce, providing them with resources, possibly education in the space that they're in. So it's maybe career development or professional development. And then you have your technology, and your technology is all the things that would be included. That would be more of softwares that you're using, again, like a smart sheet that you're using for your organization, or if you're paying for analytic service as a designer, or if you have your 3D printing or all of that, the softwares that you would use, that would be in the space of technology. And then procurement would include the acquisition of raw materials. So first you're procuring it, and then you start the process to create your pieces. And all of this plays in part, or this is a big part of your profit margin. So this is what your organization is actually banking on. And so this would be the revenue for your yearly revenue, or if this is a quarterly analysis, this is what most organizations look at this here and this. Oftentimes, organizations, why they should look into this space is because public relations is really important, HR, which is DEI, and this is since, I guess, after 2020, the situation with George Floyd, this has been extremely important for organizations to make a pivot to find leverage when it, in terms of, or when it came to their competitors. And so a lot of organizations found leverage here. And tech is really big. So tech and human resources. And today we'll go into procurement practices and sustainable procurement practices. So there are two different types of advantages of using your value chain analysis. And the first advantage is the differentiation versus the cost advantage. Differentiation advantage, the benefits are obtained from the value chain analysis when the business has to compete with other fast fashion competitors, except for cost. So this would be a differentiation advantage for a sustainable brand, I would say. And the key points considering the differentiated value chain analysis are creating superior products, satisfying customers, and adding superior features to your product. So maybe you're using a higher quality materials as opposed to lower quality materials, cotton that is not thicker cottons, maybe knits versus wovens, or interchanging that. And then the cost benefits or cost advantage is you're lowering your prices, or you're changing your prices depending on the quality of your pieces. And the cost benefits are obtained from the value chain analysis when the business is competing with other fast fashion competitors based on cost. So that's why a lot of consumers, they find it really hard to pivot from fast fashion into the space of sustainable fashion because they're not able to afford it. right? So they're going to always, this is extremely important when consumers are thinking of should they make that pivot to now be a consumer of sustainable products or sustainable clothing versus fast fashion brands. And another advantage of the differentiation advantage with which this is most important for sustainable fashion designers, because of the cost of our pieces, it's usually higher. It's important to be able to differentiate yourself in the market. So things like finding activities that add value to your product. Many times it's not only about the type of apparel, but the type of marketing. Are you empathic? A lot of that, just how are you connecting with your consumers? How are you getting them to actually make this change or to make this purchase? And analyzing differentiation strategies and activities like adding product features, doing a subscription service, marketing maybe your packaging, or getting a different type of eco-friendly packaging for your pieces, monitoring your consumers' responses and customizing pieces instead of, or doing like a small batch custom pieces or pieces that are, maybe you're doing 10 of each style and you have a collection of 6. And you're dropping them, maybe something like a Telfar, perfect example. Telfar would be a great example of this. And then finding the ideal sustainable differentiation, the best combination of the differentiation activities and strategies get to pass for sustainability and is implemented after the differentiated value chain analysis. So there's two different ways. Again, and then this is a cost advantage. Finding the relative importance of activity while considering total cost. So understanding your cost and the importance of different parts of your value chain as a fashion designer, and then possibly lowering the cost here so that you can lower your price points of your pieces. So if I am designing pieces and it takes me about $100, let's say, I wish, right? As a sustainable designer in New York City. It takes me about $100 to make a dress. That includes everything, all of the materials, the sewing, and my price point, I would probably sell this piece for $500. But that's because our budget for marketing is probably 25,000, and we can probably decrease that by, let's see, we can decrease it by 10. So we'll say we'll spend 15,000 on marketing. We can probably lower our price points for our pieces. So that's why the value chain analysis is extremely important. And then the cost drivers for activities involves identifying the cost drivers for multiple activities. Again, you're looking at different activities within your value chain analysis, and within your value chain, and you're looking at your primary activities and your secondary activities, which is why a lot of organizations are looking into technology to replace humans, unfortunately. And so also, like, maybe you're 3D printing instead of doing things manually. The cost you may spend less on materials that you're using. And so there's so many different benefits from 3D printing also. And then your value chain analysis, it builds insights into the fashion. It helps you build insights into the fashion industry using this framework, and it helps you improve the status of your products and your services, and understand the feedback that your customers are giving you or your organization in regards to your products or your services that you're providing them. And the consistent evaluation, it gives you a consistent evaluation into the supply chain, and it's driven by benefits. So when you're looking at a supply chain analysis, you're thinking of different benefits, or how can you pivot and where can you find leverage to increase your revenue. That's the profit margin. Increasing that is always the goal. And the standard fashion houses and the private houses invest in machine learning or AI. And so tech is an extremely big part of your value chain, or, depending on how big your organization is, to drive the agile supply chain operations in the fashion industry. Apart from offering cost and differentiated advantages, the value chain analysis is looking to for an accurate forecast on your inventory, on your operations management, on your marketing, and what are you doing within your organization, and what can you change and what should you change, either to lower costs or to differentiate yourself within the industry. So I'm going to go into another deck so we can go into our sustainable. I think that deck is actually a PowerPoint. One second. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, yes, I was just getting ready to write in the chat. That was really, really good. Because I am in the pivot point of defining the price for my goods. And so I have wool, 100% wool, handmade purses, handbags. They're made in Nepal. They're handmade, they're hand dyed, and they are handmade, hand dyed, and hand sewn. So same thing, I guess. 100% wool. So being that I have a natural, sustainable product, do you still go based upon your cost to make it, or do you add an additional price because of that advantage point of it being a natural, sustainable product and its benefits? So I'm very empathetic. I'm very holistic, and so like my intention of creating these handbags is for affirmations, because I know that color is a form of healing. So I am incorporating that within my brand, and so I'm still trying to figure out what the price should be, being that I'm adding those elements in, which is like the advantage, the advantage point to my brand. So I have a question upon, like, do you add those elements to your price, or do you think about just how much the product itself costs, depending on, like, how much you're paying yourself versus how much supplies cost and how much it costs to make each bag, et cetera, et cetera.
Sorry, I saw I was muted. So I don't know if you saw that I logged out by mistake, but now I logged into the Zoom app instead of the browser version. But I did hear, I got it. I think I know I did get the gist of it. I usually will add in my pricing for everything, and I multiply that by 3. So that's your labor. That's all of your, is that your question? You're asking me, is it your labor, all of your materials that you're using, all of the equipment?
Right. So being that I'm not making the purchase myself, would the labor be creating a concept of the bag, the meaning to the bag? Do I add that in, like my price into that? Like what would that cost be?
If you were to add that cost in, like the concept and all of that, that would be, you would have to make it a higher price point. So it's usually you times everything by 3 at least. So it would be, and so then you're recouping the cost of you taking your time out to build the concept, to do the sketches and all of that, to interact with manufacturers. That's I guess 66% would be yours, right? You're taking that in, and then you're saying, okay, there's electricity that's being used, there's this. So usually I times everything by 3. That's the least I do. And so if it's like you're using maybe dead stock materials or someone donated fabrics from you, then you would say, okay, I didn't spend any money on fabric, but I spent money on my time, right? So for me, as a fashion designer, I have in my head a salary that hourly salary that I want to, I know I deserve. And so if I'm creating something and it takes maybe 8 hours to sew it, or it takes me 8 hours to build this concept, to cut the patterns and all of that stuff, in my head, I know how much I need to get paid for it. if the materials are free and all of that stuff, I know that I have there's a minimum for me. And so I would say to times everything by 3 for you, as if you're not sewing it together, you would say, okay, the final cost is 300. You would times it by 3, would be 9. Did that answer your question? Because I know I came in after.
No, it did answer my question. But the portion where you say you know how much you're paying yourself because you're cutting the pattern, you're like you're doing all the labor, but being that someone else is doing my labor, but I'm asking how do I figure out what my price is, like what I'm paying myself, how am I adding the price to the product based upon like it being sustainable, it being a product that is holistic, that's going to, give something to my customers, the form of service, along with them buying a product. So like I'm asking, like how do I figure out what my price is to actually times it by that 3?
So a person that's sewing the bags, you're paying them to do it, yeah?
Yes.
So you're adding what you're paying them and then add all your material in and all of your equipment. So everything that's like when you're looking at your supply chain or your value chain, the process from A to B and your primary activities would be like your inbound logistics, regardless of if the materials go into your studio somewhere else, it's your material you paid for, it's you're paying for this person's time. You times that entire number for this one product for like a sample. So I would give you, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Tomorrow, and then value chain. I just use this one here. Oh, this one's really blurry.
While you're looking for that, Naika, I think what I'm hearing is that Janice wants to know how much to pay herself. So as a designer, and the question is, or my question, if you can add to that, is design wise itself, like the design itself has a cost. You sitting there, the time that you've spent sketching, how many sketches did you do, how much your color pencils or the software. So wouldn't that necessarily, like if it's a software, if you're using Illustrator, wouldn't that be included in your technology costs?
Yeah, so and then you would have to think of that per piece. Pay yourself at least 66% from each item, because you're not taking home 66%. You are going to maybe use 5% of that per piece. So you're thinking per piece, 5% per piece of that will go towards your electric bill, or 5% of that will go towards something that you've paid for, like an overhead cost that you've paid for the entire year. You already know that you're not taking home 66%. You'll probably take home 50 or 60% per piece, but that 6% should be those are costs you're saying to yourself you won't recoup it, or it's maybe your electric bill, if you use gas, or your water that you're dying and all that stuff. But so in your head, you're saying you're going to, if it's times 3 because it's 33%. So 1/3 is what the product costs. So for example, another tomorrow. So this shirt with everything included would be the material that the material, the person creating this piece. So we're not saying, okay, it took 10% of the electricity, because we know you already paid for that, right? An organization wouldn't take that into account unless it's a big organization and now you have project managers and then you're breaking things down. Project managers use different, they use different types of equations just to understand how they should tack on costs for different clients. So I would always say times it by 3, because that 33% is this getting made, it's your electricity, and then maybe 6% more. So I would say 39%, or 40 would be everything included. So you should at least pay yourself 66%. Does that make sense?
Okay. No, it makes sense. I'm happy you went over the portion of how much I should be paying myself. What I was saying, I don't know if I'm getting my words are getting lost in translation, but what I'm saying is, when I'm calculating the cost of my product, so you said times it by 3, and so you're saying what's being times by 3 is the how much I'm paying for the bag to be produced, and is that it? Like the materials of the bag, how much I'm paying for the bag to get produced, but does the idea of the concept, for instance, Gucci comes out with a shirt, right? They paid maybe $45 to get the shirt made, but because of their name and because of like whatever else they want to add to the price to make it that price, because it's quote unquote Gucci, they made it that price. So what I'm saying is that being that of my moral and my moral orientation and what I'm giving to my customer, does that go into the price, marking the price up or down, aside from me incorporating like how much it costs to make it and make the bag and the supplies to make the bag?
Yeah, so I think a Gucci, right, because it's less expensive for them. They're gonna, and they have the Gucci name. You would start with a certain price point. So as a fashion designer, already have your price points and understand so you wouldn't say, for example, like a Fee Noel, her pieces are probably maybe $300 for a shirt, or I don't know, maybe $400 or $500 for a dress, right? She knew she would not sell her pieces for $60, even if it was a scenario like Gucci, where it was $130, 45 times 3 is 130. She knew that she wasn't going to sell that dress for $130. So I would say, why I say at least charge times by 3, that's the least you should do, but you should never do less, and you should always do more. My dresses are like $700, $800. When I make jackets, they're like, sometimes they're 4, sometimes they go up to 9 if they're custom, or they go over 900. And that's me making it myself, right? If someone's making that piece and I've only paid $30 for that piece to be made, I'm never charging $90 for a jacket, because in my head, I already know I just already know my price points. And I think you can also times it by 3, but you should already have your price points in your head of where you're going to start. So say for your brand, with dresses, they're no less than 300. I know it's probably not, maybe you want to say 2, but I know for pants, they're no less than 100. T-shirts, they're no less than 40. For me, sweatshirts are no less than $80. T-shirts are no less than $50, $60. Even if it takes $10 to make this shirt.
Does that go into effect based upon what kind of brand you kind of label yourself to be, like a luxury brand, sustainable brand? Okay.
And you're not a fast fashion brand, right? You're a small business, your batches. So when you think of fast fashion, it's 500 to 1,000 and up. Small batches less than 500. So fast fashion, once you go into the space of over 1,000 pieces per look, so per pair of pants, per item, per SKU, over 1,000 is fast fashion. And I don't think, are you producing that much?
At the moment, no, but that will become the quantity in the future, in the near future.
Oh, yeah, so in the future, if you become like a Zara or H&M, or when you become a Zara, H&M, if that's your goal, then you would maybe possibly you could lower your price points. But for now, because you're a small batch, you're never expected as a small batch designer to create pieces that are $90, a $90 dress.
Right, that makes sense.
Unless your materials are really inexpensive and you're paying $10 to get the dress made, including materials and shipping and all that stuff.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Eudora?
Hi. So, realistically, starting out, should we be reevaluating this like every quarter to make sure that we're on target and that our numbers are working and we're not losing money? I mean, what would be your advice on,
Your price,
reviewing it and sort of twerking it,
you're
tweaking it
referring
as
to
we need to?
your price points, or your, like, when you're looking at a value chain?
The value chain itself.
So usually organizations, if you want, you can do it yearly. I wouldn't do it every season unless you're looking into like marketing and customer service every season. And then your tech. So there's certain parts in probably your HR that you'll have to do. So for an organization like, the one that I work for, Ovation in Store, this is constant. You're always looking at marketing and sales. You're looking at trends, consumer insights. But inbound logistics, these processes, unless there's like a kink or something that happens within this process and you're saying that this doesn't work, I would probably evaluate things like this twice a year, or maybe like January to July. July, what are we doing? Okay, December, what did we do well and what went wrong? And let's see how we can do something different, or what are our competitors doing when it comes to inbound logistics? What type of technology are they using to help them streamline this process here? In terms of your firm infrastructure, unless you're like adding someone else in as a partner, or maybe you're getting investors, that's when this space would change really. But I would say there's certain, this here, possibly operations or sourcing, procurement, maybe you found a different supplier, different wholesaler. But in general, I would say twice a year to do a value chain analysis.
Okay, and what's the best way? Right now, I'm tracking all of my expenses with an Excel spreadsheet. So how can I do that better in order to be able to really evaluate my numbers?
To evaluate your this here?
Exactly.
I would say Excel, there's different apps that you can use. There's QuickBooks that does a lot of different things. If you have that software, there's Smartsheet that I used to use. We use Airtable now. There's also like different procurement. Like at work, we have a cost where we have, that is Excel sheets. It spits it out into the Excel sheet. So there's different softwares. I would say I would try using a Smartsheet, or using Excel should work for now, but try QuickBooks. QuickBooks has a few different versions, and I'm sure they have versions for fashion designers. I use QuickBooks, and then it's just also more secure. But I would say that at work, we do use this platform called Cost, and that's all of our inventory, and it spits it out into an Excel sheet, and you see how much your organization spent on plastic and how much they spent on metal and the tonnage, and then you're able to calculate your return better.
Got you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. So I'm going to go into sustainable sourcing. And if you have other questions, you can always ask. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so sustainable sourcing benefits. And this deck is more so on your sourcing natural fibers and eco-friendly materials. And so a lot of sustainable fashion designers will use the textile exchange, and the textile exchange will show you preferred fibers and materials that should be used if you're tapping into sustainable fashion and you're not just looking at your tonnage, the amount of waste or different emissions, and you're saying, okay, we're gonna look into the materials that we're using. I would tap into the textile exchange here. This is a big picture of the global fiber market. So when you're thinking of the amount of tonnage as of 2019, this is the overview of the market, that this is the amount of polyester that's being used in the market. So the amount of polyester that's being used currently is 52%. Polyester is, if you're a sustainable fashion designer in the space of sustainability, you know that polyester is not eco-friendly. It's not like a natural fiber like your cotton, right? So polyester is made from chemicals, and only 14% of polyester is recycled, and less than 1% of polyester is bio-based. There are some bio-based polyesters, but there's not a lot of not a lot of designers have access to it. Then there's your cotton. 23% of what is used in today's market is cotton. And then the MMCF, these are recycled also. So these are made from like your lyocell, your tencel, all of that. Then you have your wool and your down. And less than 1% is down because, I think most designers also are conscious that there's different seasons and different, spaces. So not everyone will use down jackets. That's why a lot of designers will tap into different markets. And maybe they'll do down skirts, short skirts for the summertime and all that stuff. But the predominantly most designers are using polyester, which is it's not really recycled. There's been a 251% increase in a number of global recycled certified sites. So there's GRS sites for manufacturing facilities, and there's a list that you can find on the CFDA's website for facilities that also follows this global recycled standard. And then there's a list of factories that have science-based targets or are using science-based targets, and you can find them and see if they do small batch production if you're in the space or interested in the space of sustainable fashion. So plant-based natural fibers, one would include cotton, and again, this cotton space, let me just go back, sorry. Again, when you're thinking of cotton, 23%. So it's either polyester, cotton, and then there's other fibers that are used. Cotton has a market share of 25% as of 2019, and the market for preferred cotton is more advanced than most other materials. So preferred cotton would be like your, a lot of brands are using organic cotton now. And the market share of preferred cotton, there's the Better Cotton Initiative.org. So if you go on there, if you see BCI, there's brands that actually are certified by BCI. And then there's your Fair Trade. And then there's another organization, Cotton Made in Africa. And these are they're sustainably sourced cottons. And here you see the market share of preferred cotton. And then you see the millitons that they're of the amount of cotton that's being used, and it's increased from 5% of preferred natural fibers or eco-friendly or organic cotton. That's increased to 25% as of 2019. Preferred cotton across the globe. These are countries that are using preferred cotton. Of course, in this space will be a lot higher. They're using preferred cotton here. So the top 10 countries would be Brazil, Pakistan, China, of course, because there's a lot of production here, and a lot of brands are getting their pieces produced in Pakistan, China, India. The US also uses preferred cotton, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Greece, Cameroon, and Australia. weirdly or strangely enough, Australia has a lower number, but they are very much eco-friendly. And so what is the 2025 Sustainable Cotton Challenge? The Sustainable Cotton Challenge, this would be, this was a video that I had shown recently, and I'll show this after if I can, but most brands or most, they're so like your COP27, your COP15, or your Paris agreements, a lot of sustainable fashion brands are going into the space of making commitments to using your organic cottons or sustainably sourced cottons, or cottons that use zero pesticides, less water, they're healthier crops, and they're working with directly with your farmers. And so when you're thinking of the Sustainable Fashion Initiative, they're doing a lot of this work as well. Other plant-based fibers are hemp, and I know you've heard of hemp, or you may have heard of hemp being used as a fiber or a version of cotton, and flax. And then you have your lyocell, which is tinsel, and you have your modal. There's so many different types of natural fibers being used now outside of cotton. Now, this is your down. Down and feathers. There's a lot of organizations that are not using the responsible down standard, but there are organizations that are, and I forget, there's a really big brand that is looking into the RDS. I don't think it's Montclair. There's a brand, I was speaking about it in class, but I forget the brand. They're using this. And then there's the Global Traceable Down Standard, and then the Down Pass standard. So these three standards organizations are tapping into so that they can see, you can get a list of different manufacturers that actually have sustainably, this process is a sustainable process, so they're not hurting the animals that they're getting the feathers from. And the same with, so these are organizations that have now made the commitment. Columbia, Eileen Fisher, it's definitely a really well-known sustainable brand that is doing a lot of great work. Esprit, Gucci, H&M, Hugo Boss, all of these brands, Patagonia, Ralph Lauren, the North Face now is in the space of using your responsible down standard and all of the down pass standard. And Tommy Hilfiger is really has tapped into the space of sustainable fashion design and production as well. And then there's your responsible wool standard. It's similar to the the Better Cotton Initiative and the responsible down standard. It's the same process when you think of it. And you can find all of these standards online and do some research just to see where you can start to source if you're interested in using sustainably sourced wool, because it is from animal products. I don't use any animal products in my pieces, but maybe eventually once I feel confident about the RWS, possibly use wool or use other materials in my processes that are animal-based, but at the moment I do not. Responsible virgin sheep wool. There is the bulk of the virgin sheep wool, the farms are in South Africa. So 63% of the farms in South Africa are responsibly sourced, or that process is a responsible or sustainable process. Argentina accounts for 15, Uruguay 13, and 0 is 0.1. So there's not a lot of farmers in the US that's actually doing this process correctly. And so if there's a sustainable fashion brand that's producing in the US and they're sourcing their wool from the US, you can say to yourself that it's not responsible virgin sheep wool. And the same for your mohair. It's the same process. If you look on that responsible wool standard, you can find information on mohair there. It is wool, but you'll find information on different types of animal products or materials based off of animal, their hairs. Other virgin wool would be your alpaca, Angora rabbit, camel hair, llama, Vicuna, and Llama Loropiana uses llama, and they do use sustainably the same process. They're using the responsible wool standard, and they're going into different factories or using factories that are producing responsibly. And then you have your yak hair. So recycled wool standards. This is wool that has been recycled, and so that's not your virgin. And of course, anything recycled, we would say is much better to use, but it depends on that process. So you have your recycled claim standard, your global recycled standard, your SCS recycled claim standard, and Cardado recycled. So Cardado recycled is a type of, it's a process for recycled wool. And commitments to preferred wool. Are these organizations? I feel like we'll see Eileen Fisher everywhere here. In Patagonia, Ralph Lauren is doing that, and Target has also tapped into making commitments to sourcing preferred wool. Now, silk is made from worms, and so the same process. There is a silk standard. There is a responsible leather roundtable, where you can see how, as a small business or organization, you can go about sourcing leather responsibly. Recycled leather and leather alternatives. So there's a brand that I really love called Mylo. Has anyone heard of Mylo? Okay. So Mylo uses mushroom fibers to create leather. And there's your Pinatex, that's why you see the pineapple here. There's also brands making leather using scraps from apples. My favorite is the mushroom leather because mushrooms have mycelium, and it's like clusters of cells. And so it actually feels like, there's cells on everything. Every living organism has if it's living, there's cells, right? But my mycelium, and you can even see it here, it makes for a different texture of leather. And I'll show you what Mylo leather looks like. So Mylo leather looks like this, and it looks just like leather. And it's really, really strong. So think of when you're eating a mushroom, it's kind of tough. It's the same concept you're getting here.
How much does it cost to even the process of growing the mushrooms and then converting it to leather?
It's really, it's expensive, but Mylo they had so many investors that they've tapped into. They're now working with your Adidas. They had a collection with Adidas. Stella McCartney is using them. So it's expensive, but when they had a collection, so here's their Adidas collab with the Mylo leather, and then the bottom, they also made it using some type of recycled material.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is really incredible. And I love mushrooms. I just have I have mushrooms, everything, like mushroom tea, and it's just really good for the environment, but it's such a strong material. So I always say, in the future, I would use Mylo to create leather goods. Let me minimize this here. Okay. And man-made, there's man-made items, fibers made from cellulose. And there's types of lyocell is also a man-made fiber, right? But it's taken from maybe wood fibers and it's they use cellulose to create that process. And then there's a forest management. It's similar to your forest initiative or FSC certification for paper. So they're the same initiative, the forest management initiative. They have that, and there's a audit that is released every year is the canopy style audit. And you can look into that for forest management if you're interested in seeing where if you're using your natural fibers. Tinsel is a very great organization. And so if you go on their website, you'll probably see the canopy style audit on there, or you'll see a few different initiatives that they have. And then there's your synthetic fibers, which would be your synthetic, your polyester. Synthetic polyester is made using plastic fibers, but it's not recycled plastic unless it's recycled polyester. So here's another map of different countries that are actually producing recycled polyester. And in the US, these are the countries. There's a few different countries. Here, I would say the US has a bulk of them. And then other countries like China has a few, Japan, and then India has a few. So if you're sourcing or you're producing in these spaces, and in Italy as well. And then there's more synthetic fibers like this here. And you'll see this, usually there's brands that are actually working with organizations that's recycling the material, and then they're using this material to recreate different fibers. And then there's other man-made materials, and I'll go into, that's the end of the deck, but I wanted to show you all.
I don't know if this is a good, is it okay to use man-made recycled materials, or does that still consider you as sustainable?
Man-made.
If it's not a natural material?
Yeah, because it's recycled plastic. And so what you're doing is you're closing the loop, and you're creating the space of like circular economy. So you are taking, and I wanted to show you this process. So maybe this will answer your question, Thread International Cologne. 1 second. So there's this organization that was working, they still work with, I think, Timberland. And they take your fibers from plastic bottles. So the process would be, and these are all made from plastic bottles. So all of this here, even there's Timberland boots that are made from recycled plastic bottles. So that process, what that looks like is you're taking a plastic bottle, and when you recycle it, you're shredding it first. So you would separate it per material. So if this is polystyrene, you would shred this, and then you melt it down, and then you create fibers. You're melting it down and you're creating like thin fibers. And then that's where you would create your fabrics. And that process is long, but you're taking plastic bottles out of the waste stream. So this would sit in a landfill, and it would start to emit certain maybe your CO2, methane gas, and different types of other gases. It is now going into a manufacturer that's going to reuse it and make fiber with it, or make your fabrics with it. So that can be reused. And then you can take that, and then you can recycle this material and possibly add in some organic cotton or virgin cotton. And then you're keeping that loop closed instead of leaving it open. Does that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome. So there's a lot of brands like
I think Pharrell did a project like that with T-Star, where they were collecting they were collecting plastic bottles from the ocean and making jeans, I remember. And so it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of brands that was doing it. I think it's called Parlor. There's a really big brand that's doing it, taking plastic from the ocean. And for me, at work for Ovation and Store, I source plastic bottles from the ocean. So there's ocean-bound plastics outside of this UBQ material, ocean-bound. Okay. There's ocean-bound plastics, and they're taking plastic out of your waste stream, out of the ocean, and they're using that, repelletizing it. See, you shred down the plastic, you melt it, you repelletize it. And then if you're making something that would have to be molded, this would be a molded piece, you're melting it into this mold to make this cup. So that's the process. And the same with fabric, it's the same. So it goes to be collected, it's sorted, cleaned, shredded, and then it's engineered into raw material. And then you're using that. Here, they're using it for packaging, where Ovation In-Store, we use it to make things like this. So we create these displays and we're using that plastic to make these displays. So I guess if anyone has any questions, I'll stop the screen share.
I guess this is the question, like, with the direction of the world is heading in terms of like the whole holistic approach, people kind of like having an awakening moment. For me, starting out with my brand with the handbags, which are sustainable and natural, I do aim to be a ethical brand where I would like to use recycled materials and natural fibers to like create clothing. And my question to that is, do you see that being something beneficial in terms of where like the direction of the world is heading? I've seen like small articles, but like you maybe you seem like you're very immersed in the knowledge of the sustainable community.
Yeah, I think most brands are doing it, and most brands have to do it now. So there's not a question about, so if you're making more than like 1 million a year, you know that you have to, like, so for Ovation In-Store, we have our partners that will not work with us if we are not at least 30% of each item that's made, or each product has to be made using recycled material. They don't care. They want to see it. They want to see who our suppliers are. They have questions. And so there's all of these new rules that will go into effect before 2030 for organizations that have a certain revenue, annual revenue. If you're in that space, you won't have a choice but to do that. And they will go into so many different aspects of your organization. So you can look at someone's 10K report. You can find Nike's 10K report to see how they're using their funds, if they're using it sustainably, if they're sourcing, how are they sourcing? Is it actually sustainable? You can go into their CSR report and compare that to their 10K report. So most organizations are tapping into the space of sustainability, even Gucci, even your Balenciagas, because more Gen Zers, the Generation Z is just like really, when it comes to leading lifestyles of health and sustainability, they're very much conscious about that. And so I don't think there's going to be you won't have a choice eventually, but to live a lifestyle that's sustainable.
Thank you.
Mika,
You're
do you
welcome.
think that along those lines, because sustainable products is currently so expensive, that we'll ever see, garments with tons of yardage, just like I don't know, Carolina Herrera wedding gowns that are, completely sustainably made, that have, 20, 30 yards, that are actually ultimately could be, cost effective for people.
I think cost effective for like all consumers.
Correct.
No, I don't think, and I think, it's this sad part, but the beautiful part about it is that these organizations, though, they can become eco-friendly, but they those brands probably will not change their price points for consumers, because then they would have to change their target audience. And they don't want to cater to a target audience that is low income. It sounds terrible, I know. But I know that's not their goal. And so the same way for me, I know my target audience, and, someday possibly once I open a factory in Haiti and my pieces, it's cheaper to make, but maybe I can sell cheaper, not saying I'm paying employees less, but like the process is cheaper. I can lower my price points, but my target audience wouldn't be for that price point. And not saying like I don't appreciate, because I come from that price point, right? But I think these brands they are conscious of their target audience, and they'll probably create collections for a demographic that can afford a lower price point, but then they'll keep their collections for like a $2,000 dress for Carolina Herrera, I would say.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think as we're looking at like the leather goods, the changes in cotton and all of that, it's I just wonder if it's going to change the look of fashion, towards, there's.
I think that's what I was thinking also. I think it will, but I think the brands that started years ago, as they're sourcing, they'll probably be able to, keep the same aesthetic. But I feel like everything's just going to be a lot more green. I don't know if brands could continue to get away with all the dyes that they're using and the bright colors, and unless it's dead stock. I feel like things will start to change in the way that we see designers actually creating pieces.
I have a question. In your opinion, how long do you think it'll take before these materials become more affordable, so that, designers with smaller businesses could actually tap in and it be another resource that they could afford?
I wish I knew the answer to that, because I would be doing it. That's why my price points are so high, because
Yeah.
and there's ways that you can go around getting material for less if you're in that space. Like, so if we were in Japan, or like in the space that they have actually these facilities, they're creating the materials, I feel like it would be easier. But I don't see that for like maybe 10 plus years.
Wow. Okay.
Because
all right. So
we're
got
just
a little time to wait.
Yeah, I feel like we're just not doing the work as globally, like humans are just not doing the work for it to be cheaper. And if we all did the work, I think that would just make things less, they would make them inexpensive.
And it has to be embraced as a whole, I think, too.
Yeah.
The consumers really have to embrace it in order for the demand to go up and the prices go down, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also changing the mentality, right? Like fast fashion, especially for low income people, it's just so easy to go online and get a $3-4 dress.
Yeah.
And the idea is that buying clothing that you like, that looks pretty, it's fashionable, that doesn't break the bank for you as a consumer. But as designers, we want to be better. We want to be good to the environment. And in that same vein, we're alienating the people that, like you said, the people where we come from,
Yeah.
who could potentially buy, who understand the aspect of sustainability, but just can't afford it.
Yeah, I would love to see like that material, that's recycled plastic bottle material. That's usually cheaper than your lyocell and your modal, like those natural, the cellulose materials or fabrics made from cellulose, though the fabrics made from cellulose are usually more expensive, and the ones made from recycled plastic is less expensive. So I would love to see like a fast fashion designer actually, you know, I don't want to see a fast fashion designer at all, but if they could work in a certain space where they're paying their employees better wages, the facilities are, you know, they have a set of standards and they're providing resources and they're using this recycled material, and somehow they're shipping it on a plane that does not use gas. And like, there's like, this would be the best scenario ever. But it's so hard because it's like, it's cheaper overseas, but then it has to get here to the US to the consumer. And that's the biggest footprint. Yeah.
Well, on that down note.
I know.
Thank you so much for all this amazing information. It's definitely a lot of food for thought, I think, definitely for our participants as designers. And you know, obviously it's their world, you know, you all, Eudora, Denise, Regina, as designers, it's up to you to help move that needle forward as designers. And maybe it won't take 10 or so years, maybe it will take less, but it's definitely something to think about.
Let's say 5.
Okay, look at that. We've already cut down by half the time.
Yeah.
But thank you again, Aika. Everybody, I'll share the recording in Slack, and we will be back with Naika next week.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.